Alright guys, this is part 3 of the notes. You guys better know that I love you because I have spent an unholy amount of time trying to record this. That is why I look so tired right now. Hopefully this will be a little simpler going forward. My goal is to record the video with the notes or with the assignment if it is needed, and then put a link to YouTube. That way you guys don't have to have any special technology or try to download it or anything like that, or have any sharing settings. Guys, I'm really sorry. I know this is frustrating. I'm not great with technology, so thank y'all for being patient. Thank you guys for continuing to ask questions through email and not just giving up. I'm hoping that things are going to get a little bit better. Just kind of hang in there, guys. It's going to get better. Okay. That's a pep talk for me as much as it is for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and do part 3. Hopefully this part won't be too long. Okay, so this is your warm-up. I just want you to take a little bit of time and do this. What you can do is you can pause the video of me talking right now, and it's going to give you a second to choose to read through this and think, what two do you believe are true, which do you think are false, and then explain why. This is totally an opinion question, okay? So this is just getting your brain thinking about the topic, so that way if you have been doing other things, that'll kind of help you in that way, okay? And I'm going to go to full screen real quick because I think it's easier to see. Okay, so we're going to talk about the home front. The home front means this is what's going on in the United States while the war is happening. This is really what our class is talking about. The stuff that's going on overseas, that's really more your 7th grade stuff. I just wanted to give you guys a review of that so you would know what's going on. As all the soldiers go off and fight in the war, not all of them, but a lot of those men are going to go off and fight in the war, so it's going to leave some jobs open for women to work in factories, and that has been happening to a certain extent, but it's going to happen on a much larger scale now, okay? So America mobilizes for war. Remember when I said mobilize, I wanted you guys to think of the word mobile is moving. So the United States has been building an army since before we declared war. We've been asking for volunteers, and then in May of 1917, we're going to get what's called the Selective Service Act, which is the draft, okay? The draft's been around for a long time, and so that is something that they're going to start up again, okay? There are going to be 24 million men that are going to be registered for the draft. Only 2.8 million are actually going to be drafted, and then you've got some other people that are volunteering, so that's going to end up with about 4.8 million men that are going to be fighting in the American uniform during the war. Okay, so we've got to completely change our economy to what's called a war economy, which means that instead of making like Campbell's soup, we're making K-rations, which are basically just the food supply that the soldiers will need, things like that. We're also making other things like weapons. So those industries are going to change. So someone is going to say, what foods can be produced, how coal is produced, how petroleum or gas is going to be produced, how the railroad is going to be used. Everything is going to be focused towards the war effort, okay? And this is going to be determined by what's called the War Industry Board, and it just decides what products can be made and what price is going to be paid. This is not something that we think about in the United States, but the whole economy is working towards one goal, okay? And I want you guys to think about that kind of during right now, like 2020. The whole country is stopping to try to fight this virus. This is, it's not the same, but there are some commonalities there. People are agreeing to shut down their businesses, even though that could be bad for their business because they know it's what's good for people to get the virus under control. So that's a similar idea. Okay, there's also going to be what's called the Food Administration, and it's going to increase prices for food. And that is basically so that farmers will make more, and then it's going to ask Americans to not buy a bunch of food. And the reason that they're doing that is they want to be able to send that food to soldiers. So they want the farmers to produce more, but they want the American people to conserve or not buy as much so that they can send that food over to the soldiers. Not to mention, France and Great Britain have been fighting for 3.5 years. So their people need food. Okay. So the United States is trying to kind of fill in that gap in that way. Okay. All right, and then the last thing is public opinion. So the way that people see the world, not the world, the war, the way that we are educating the public during this time period. And you have to remember, people don't have TVs during this time period, so it's over radio, or a lot of people are seeing stuff, maybe advertisements in the newspaper, things like that. Like, why are we fighting the war? Why are we doing this? So thinking about it in a positive way, like we're the good guys. That's usually the way that propaganda works, is saying they are the bad guys, we are the good guys. And so that's going to be going on too. Okay. There are going to be some people who are not in favor of the war, okay? There are people that don't believe that the draft is legal. They don't believe that if you don't want to fight, that you shouldn't have to fight. And so there are going to be some people that are called conscientious objectors. And those are people who morally, deep down, have religious beliefs that they believe that they shouldn't fight in wars. It's a part of the Ten Commandments that thou shalt not murder. And some people are going to take that as don't fight in wars. And so there are going to be some people who are legally allowed to do that, but the public are going to push back against those people and call them cowards. There's also going to be some women that are against the war effort. They don't see it as something that is good for the people. So this lady right here, she was one of the first women in the U.S. Congress, and she is going to be one of the only people that doesn't vote to go to war. And the next election cycle, she is going to be voted out. But she's going to get back in after that. But anyways, most women are going to support the war effort once the war actually begins. So most people gets behind the war effort once we're actually in the war, because they want to support our soldiers, because they know opposing the war might hurt their soldiers, okay, which may be their brothers or their husbands or their sons in that way, okay? All right, the government is going to really crack down on anyone that says anything against the government. So that is dissent. So anything against the war effort or how the government is handling it, there's going to be laws against that. And you guys have to remember, we still have the First Amendment right. And so during times of war, sometimes we suspend or we limit those rights. And some people really disagree with that. We did this after 9/11 with the Patriot Act. And in June 1917, we're going to do this with the Espionage Act. It's going to allow the Postal Authority, which is post office, to ban any kind of letter, newspaper, flyer that goes through the mail if it is what they would consider treasonable or seditious. Basically anything that talks bad about the government and the way the government's handling the war, okay? And a lot of times we don't think about the United States doing that, but they did. And punishments could be up to $10,000 or up to 20 years in prison. It's also going to be unlawful to use, quote, disloyal, profane, scurrilous, or abusive language about the government. These two things support each other, okay? All right, the war is going to change American society as a whole. This is when women get the right, like right after this is when World War I is when women get the right to vote. And a lot of people say, you know, women were a part of that workforce. Women went overseas. They served as nurses. They supported the war effort. They deserve the right to vote. And that is a big push for allowing women to have the right to vote. This would say African Americans, sorry, not African. But African Americans are also going to fill a lot of those jobs that those white soldiers left behind. And so this is going to start opening up jobs for African Americans in the North. And this is going to be the start of what's called the Great Migration, which is when a lot of African Americans are going to leave the South and they're going to move to the North to work a lot of these jobs, to escape racism, to escape lynching. Remember, we talked about how violent it is in the South. And this is going to happen over several decades. So the Great Migration starts in 1916, 17, 18, around there, and it's going to go all the way until the 1950s, until right after World War II. So it takes people a while to decide to leave in some cases, and people are going in different places. Some people are going north, some people are going to the Midwest. So this is where cities like Detroit and areas in New York City like Harlem are going to really get their African American presence where they didn't have that before. Some people are also going to go out west to California, but most people are going north and most people are going west. Okay. All right, so the Americans are going to give the Allies the edge. So when the United States actually joins the war, we are going to protect shipping. So as we are shipping goods over there, we are going to protect those to make sure U.S. subs do not, or not U.S. subs, sorry, German subs do not attack that. The Allies have been struggling because I told you the Russian Revolution happened and Russia is going to sign a treaty with Germany. They're going to leave the war. Again, you do not have to remember the name of that treaty or anything like that. I'm just letting you know that it's happening. Okay, American troops, whenever we enter the war, they're going to carry a big part of the burden of fighting, and that is because everyone else has been fighting for 3.5 years. So by the end of the war, we're going to see 1.3 million Americans have served in the front lines. Over 100,000 are going to lose their life, and we're going to see over 200,000 that are going to be seriously wounded. Okay. By 1918, the war is going to end. This is called Armistice Day. It happens November 11th, 1918. This is why we have on November 11th, we have Veterans Day. It's in memorial of the end of this war, because this was supposed to be the war to end all war. Once the United States got involved, Germany had been fighting for so long, and Austria-Hungary had been fighting for so long, and they did not have the added help of getting a new team member the way that the Triple Entente had with the United States entering. They just could not continue to fight the war. Germany's plan, the Schlieffen Plan, was a good one, but remember, I told you guys it was dependent on it working quickly. Once it didn't work quickly, they got in trouble, okay? All right, so Wilson, once the war is over, Wilson starts promoting peace. Even though Wilson, remember, he's our president at the time, even though Wilson did not originally want to get in the war, now that the war is over, he sees this as a chance for democracy to grow, okay? So he is going to plan what is called his 14 points. And one of those points was called a League of Nations, which was basically a group of nations, international nations that could get together and they could solve these problems by talking about them rather than going to a big war like this. The people of Europe thought that Wilson was great. If you look at that bottom picture on the right, it says Vive Wilson. That is in the streets of Paris. It means live Wilson. It was a positive thing. The problem with this is that Wilson is a Democrat, and he doesn't bring any American Republicans with him when he goes to France to make up this treaty. So whenever Wilson is helping to make this treaty in Europe, whenever he's got to bring it back to the United States and get it signed by Congress, those Republicans are going to be really mad at him, and we're going to see that's going to cause some problems, okay? All right, so Wilson really wanted this war. It's over, and he's saying, let's move on. All of the other nations are mad at Germany, and they're like, we need to punish Germany. We need to punish them badly. Germany caused all of this problem, which is not exactly fair. Austria-Hungary also was causing some problems, but Germany, they felt like they were the one that caused the brunt of the problem, the brunt of the aggressive nature of the war, okay? And the leaders of the other nations said, Wilson, you just don't understand. You guys didn't come in until the very end of the war. It is not your country that has been destroyed, so you just don't understand. And so they're going to push for what are called reparations, which means that Germany is going to have to pay back the damages that they have done. And this is going to make Germany extremely weak. And the reason they were doing that is they didn't want Germany to be a future threat, okay? So by the time that they're making this treaty in Europe, all of Wilson's 14 points are going to be rejected except for the League of Nations, which was what's going to eventually become the United Nations that is still around today, which again is just a group of nations, representatives, diplomats that can talk about problems rather than fight about them, okay? The end of the war is going to get rid of some countries, like Austria-Hungary is no longer going to exist, the Ottoman Empire is no longer going to exist, and it's going to create some new countries, okay? But it's going to put those under imperialist control. So that means that these new countries are going to be controlled by other countries, and then also within these countries, there's going to be some mixed ethnic groups, and so that's going to cause some problems that, again, is going to lead us to another world war. So the problems of this treaty that ends World War I is going to sow seeds that creates World War II, okay? So just kind of keep in mind what problems could be happening, okay? So America gets home. Congress has got to pass this, and we're going to see that it's not going to happen, okay? The German Americans, so that's Americans that are of German descent, they thought that the treaty was too harsh on Germany. And you guys, you have to understand that at this time period, English was the most spoken language in the United States. The second most spoken language in the United States was German. It was not Spanish like it is today. So there were a lot of Americans that were of German descent. My family was of German descent. So those German Americans don't want the treaty because they think it's too harsh on Germany. They're putting all the blame on Germany. And to be fair, it was very harsh on Germany. Also, a lot of Americans say, we don't want to sign this treaty because this idea of the League of Nations is going to entangle us or get us caught up in another European affair. We don't need to have anything to do with Europe other than trade, okay? So what Wilson does is he goes on a national tour and he speaks and he politics, and he's trying to get the American people to support the treaty and encourage Congress to do that. In the middle of this, he's going to have a stroke. It's very debilitating. He gets back to Washington. Congress rejects, the Senate rejects the treaty. The League of Nations ends up being a failure because the United States is not in it. As a result, Wilson he has a really, really hard time. He kind of entered the end of the war, went to Europe, and was this hero. Remember, we saw that picture of Vive Wilson in the streets of Paris, and now he kind of comes back a failure, okay? All right, I want you guys to look at some of these pictures real quick, okay? So the pictures at the top is what it looked like before. The picture at the bottom is what it looked like in the end, and these are pictures in France. So France was really badly damaged by the war, okay? Also, I want you to look at the casualty chart, okay? I'm going to zoom out of this a little bit so that I can get my little tool here. Okay, let's see if I can zoom in some. Okay, so if you guys look at this, over here is the country, and over here is the total amount of people that they mobilized. Over here is the total amount that were killed or died. This is wounded, missing in action, casualties. The thing that we want to look at is the casualties percent of mobilized. I want you to look at Russia. 76.3% of the people that went off to fight died. That is a ton of people. That's 3 out of every 4. That is more than that. If you look at France, it's the same. 3 out of every 4. And if you look at the total amount that they mobilized, that's 12 million people. That's an enormous amount of people, okay? And we want to look down here at the United States. We had 8.2 die. And part of the reason is we didn't enter the war until later. But whenever you hear these other nations like France and Russia and Great Britain say, you don't know what's going on, this is what they're talking about. The United States did not have as many losses, and the United States did not have to deal with the destruction like we're seeing right here, okay? Whether it is people dying or whether it is like villages and things that have been destroyed. So that's really what they're talking about whenever we think about that. Okay, I'm going to zoom back in. We're almost done, guys. Okay. All right, effects of World War One. So America, as it's adjusting to peace, is going to come down with this terrible pandemic. Okay, you guys should know that word. Okay, that's what we're talking about with the coronavirus and what is it? COVID-19. Okay, so the Spanish flu, it is going to kill 1/3 of the planet's population. That is one out of, and it's going to end up killing 25% of the United States population, or 25% is going to become sick, and then is going to die with it. Okay, so the United States, well, first, all of these nations, they just lost a ton of people to war. And then the same year that the treaty is signed to create peace to end this war, this terrible flu is going to happen. Okay, and this isn't a normal flu. This is what's called the Spanish flu, and it caused people's immune system to fight against themselves, and people ended up dying from it. It killed twice as many people as died in World War One. So think about how big that number is, and then add that to how many people died. Another thing that's weird about the Spanish flu is it killed people that were very healthy and not people that were very sickly or weak. So it killed people that were in that range of 15 to 25 years old. They had the highest rate of death. And so that's also the range of soldiers. And so there's really a generation there that is just going to be completely destroyed by the war and then by this flu. Okay. Interesting fact, this is when surgical masks kind of started during this time period, and they encouraged people to start wearing those to keep from getting the flu. So interesting. All right, post-war recession. So the economy has to slow down after the war is over. They're not building as many things in factories. They're not selling as many things in factories. And so we're going to see a lot of women that were working in those factories and African Americans, they're going to lose their jobs, and it's going to cause the economy to have a little bit of a hard time, but just for a little while. Okay, there's also going to be this fear. It's called the Red Scare. And basically it's just this fear of communism and fear that it's going to spread in the United States. And we're going to see this Red Scare. It happens again after World War II, going into the Cold War. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more then. But it's starting, remember that revolution in Russia that happened? That's where that fear is coming from, okay? All right, last thing. Whoops. Oh, no. Sorry. All right, as the war ends, we get a new president. His name is Harding, and he runs on this idea of embracing normalcy. Let's get back to normal. Let's get back to the things that America does best. And so he pushes back against that progressive movement. So remember, last unit we talked about making laws that are protecting people. He says, let's just get back to becoming this economic giant again, getting money back that people owe us from the war. Let's get back to normal. Let's stop worrying about a war. Let's stop worrying about the Spanish flu. Let's just get back to normal. And that is what's going to lead us into the Roaring Twenties. And that'll be kind of the next unit that we talk about. Okay? All right, we are done with those notes. You guys are going to be so tired of listening to me today if you've listened to all three of these. Hopefully you haven't. Hopefully you're listening to this on Thursday. Anyways, talk to you guys later.